Hi everyone, and welcome to Core Lecture 15, Reading Academic Works. Like I mentioned in Core Lecture 14, I am currently traveling and in Portland for a conference right now. I don't have my equipment on me, so I do apologize if the audio quality is not up to where it normally is for our other lectures, and I appreciate your patience and understanding on that. Let's jump into our discussions on reading academic works then. Before we begin, you will need access to the following materials for our lecture assignment. You'll need access to your weekly homework document, and you will need one scholarly source, I would say preferably an article, that you plan to use for Project 3, your annotated bibliography. The purpose and goals for today's lecture are as follows. We'll identify components of an academic scholarly article, we'll define and discuss the value of critical reading, and we'll explore strategies for reading scholarly articles in an engaging and effective manner. Academic articles. So this term should be familiar at this point in the semester because we did take time to carefully discuss what is a scholarly source versus what is a popular source. An academic article would be considered a scholarly source and fits very well under that umbrella. These are going to be works that appear in peer-reviewed publications. Remember how we discussed with when we are differentiating between popular and scholarly sources that the publication rate and the time it takes to publish scholarly works is very slow in comparison to other forms of popular media, such as a magazine or a trade journal or something along those lines. And so, because of that, though it gives the editorial board an opportunity to really dig into what the author is saying. Because remember, the purpose of scholarly sources is to further a discussion. It is to further understanding on a particular topic. And so when we see these scholarly works appearing in peer-reviewed publications, we know that the information that they're relaying are as accurate as they can possibly be, because it's not only written by an expert in the field, but it is also reviewed and edited by other experts in the field. These works are often shorter in nature and can range really anywhere from 10 to 40 pages, depending on the discipline that you're reading in. It'll also have a narrow topic focus. So, for example, if you are writing on, let's say, green energy, and you are looking at articles discussing that, rather than green energy being the focus, it would be something very specific, looking at the applications of green energy in the desert, examining solar panels in southern Utah. So we're not just talking about green energy in general, rather, an academic article would say, I want to look at a specific location and how they're using something, a specific tool, technology, concept, and how does that apply to the larger issue at hand, which would be green energy. So they do it by looking at very specific and appropriate case studies. Also recall that academic works, including academic articles, attempt to fill a gap within a discipline's existing scholarship. So someone might say, oh, well, we've done a really good job looking at this, through this theoretical lens. We've looked at this topic through a feminist lens for a while. What happens if we look at it through a decolonial lens or a Marxist lens? Or if you're in more of a STEM-based field, or if you're looking and gathering research from more STEM-based disciplines, maybe someone's saying, oh, well, we haven't tried this methodology in our research. Perhaps we haven't used this type of tool, or we haven't considered this type of variable and how that might alter the outcomes that we're seeing. So we can look at that in terms of the gap that needs to be filled. Because of all of this, though, it requires critical reading skills. Academic articles, they can be tough to get through. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. They can be very dense, very technical. They can really pull from a lot of, or they tend to utilize a lot of jargon and technical terms that only other people who have done a lot of research would know right off the bat. So they can be daunting. But what we're going to discuss here in just a moment are ways to make the process of reading academic works far more manageable. So what we're going to do then is we are going to do a critical reading approach to academic articles. Now, when we take a critical reading approach, that means that we're actively reading and engaging with a text, rather than just, allowing our eyes to follow the words across the page. This is going to ask you as the reader to almost kind of kinesthetically get involved. So, using Post-it notes to, make notes or write questions, using highlighters, using pens and pencils, or other types of materials that really get you hands-on with the article itself. Now, you can also do this digitally as well. A number of content management systems like Mendeley or Zotero will allow you to highlight on the text, make notes, even if you were doing so from your laptop, tablet, or smartphone. So as you go through the text, rather than just saying, oh, okay, this is what the author says, it's almost as if you are engaging in an open dialogue with the author. And that's how you can look at it. And I think that's when you get the most out of it, is you say, all right, this isn't just me reading their ideas, this is me engaging with their ideas. So as you go through, if they say something that you don't necessarily agree with or understand, you could say, oh, don't agree with this, we'll have to come back to it. I don't know how they're using this term, or I don't know why they decided to look into this in the way that they did, or we'll need to look up how to define this word, things of that sort. We can then think of critical reading as a process of analyzing, interpreting, and evaluating a text through the use of highlighting or making notes as you read. Really, critical reading comes down to, or successful critical reading comes down to, really getting involved with the text, both physically and intellectually. So it's not just saying, wait, author, I have a question here, but it's writing down that question in the margins, or using a Post-it note to say, come back to this. I am curious why they decided to survey those in southern Utah for solar panels and not Las Vegas. Okay, so why critical reading? Why this approach? I found that critical reading can help writers internalize and extend upon the work, because as you're reading critically, you are entering your own ideas, your own interpretations, your own beliefs into the text that you are reading and trying to engage with. And so that'll help you develop ideas, especially with Project 4, where I ask you to make your own original argument regarding a topic. You could say, oh, well, this scholarly article I read made this argument. Well, I agreed with it overall, I would do this differently. Well, boom, maybe there's your argument, or there's the start to your argument. It also can help aid with content retention. So what I mean by that is, if you are actively taking notes, you're more likely to remember where you read something. Maybe there's a great quote that completely explains precisely what you're talking about, but you say, oh, shoot, I can't find it, because, you weren't actively engaging with the text. You could say, oh, but if you do actively engage with the text, you might find yourself saying, oh, yeah, I remember it was in this piece because I also made this comment that was relatively similar. I'll also say it can help you save a lot of time in the long run. Because as you are referencing these works, as you're composing, especially your own argumentative piece, rather than saying, oh shoot, what was this idea about, or where did I read this, or what exactly were they saying, how did I respond to it, you already have your notes ready to go. You have already engaged with that text in a critical way, and and you have that material readily available to you, rather than having to go through and reread all of the articles that you think it could possibly be in. No, you have a way of quickly referencing and locating that content that you were looking for. Strategies for critical reading. Like I said, some academic articles are just tiresome. Lack of a better word, they are tiresome. They are daunting. They are, sometimes they're just difficult to get through. Like I said, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. So, and I think though that makes the case for why you want to practice critical reading, as much as you can and as effectively as you can. And even though you might have a text that's 10 pages, 20, 30, or even 40 pages, you want to skim first. Oftentimes our immediate response is, I'm going to read this word for word. I am going to make sure I remember every single thing that the author said. No, don't do that, because that's going to be very time consuming, especially if you're just trying to see if a source is relevant to your research. So if you're looking at solar panels, as it relates to people in the southwestern communities. Well, if someone is doing a paper on solar panels in the mid-Atlantic or on the East Coast, that might not be the type of information that you want. That might not be helpful to you. And so rather than taking time to read the article in detail, if you skim first, you can pick up to say, okay, is this going to be entirely relevant? What you can do to aid with that is begin by reading the introduction and the conclusion first, and doing so carefully. Usually these sections are anywhere from one paragraph to a couple pages long, again, depending on how long the article in its entirety happens to be. This will give you a good sense of the argument that the authors intend to make, their ways of going about making that argument or testing that argument. And then the conclusions will the conclusion section will let you know, okay, this is what we found out. This is why we think it's important. As you do that, as you start with the introduction and the conclusion, maybe you say, hey, this is really fascinating. They bring up this idea or this concept, or they talk about this data that they noted from their study. And then that gives you key terms and key ideas to keep an eye out for if you decide to read the text in its entirety. You could say, okay, well, they're talking about solar panels in Phoenix. And they found that you could even say, going back to the example of it being on the East Coast, you could say, oh, well, in the conclusion, they mentioned how installing solar panels in Newark, New Jersey would have similar results to installing them in Phoenix, Arizona, or Las Vegas, Nevada. So at that point, you can say, oh, well, initially, maybe I didn't think this was relevant, but by reading the conclusions, I found out that it was, or there are some bits from this piece that are relevant to my work. And then that also gives you the opportunity to say, oh, they mentioned, Las Vegas or Phoenix. So I'm going to keep an eye out for that if I decide to read the rest of the text. Or I'm going to pay careful attention to see how they came to the conclusion that comparing the use of solar panels in Newark, New Jersey is similar to that, using them in Phoenix, Arizona. So if you do decide to read the article in its entirety, if after reading the introduction and the conclusion, you say, yes, this is something that's going to be helpful, you want to then perform a more detailed reading of the body based on the information you gathered in the introduction and conclusion. So like I said, if as you're going through in the conclusion, they say, hey, yeah, Newark is similar to Phoenix, you can find yourself saying, okay, well, I'm going to keep an eye out for Phoenix in the text, or I am going to keep a careful eye out for how they can make this comparison. Now, as you do a more detailed reading through the body of the text itself, we do again want to engage our bodies more than just our eyes with the reading process. We want to ask questions. We want to extend claims. We want to critique the argument or author. one of the best ways I can suggest going about this would be to pretend that the author is sitting right there, but you have the opportunity to stop them and say, oh, wait, hold on. Can you define this? Or, oh, wait, I don't know if I understand the direction you're taking with this. Or, oh, hey, that's a good point. Or I disagree. And so you can pretend that the author is sitting right there with you, and that's where you are going to develop some of your more critical thoughts and responses that can be very informative to any argument that you put together. I also would recommend to compose a brief summary and reflection of about 50 words on the article. So this can be a summary, this can be what you found useful, this could be major questions or concerns that you had, really whatever type of a summary and reflection you think would be most helpful as you go back and reference these notes when you're composing your own argument. All right, so here's what I would like you to do for the lecture assignment. I would, if I can get this box where I want it, there we go. I'd like you to locate one scholarly article that you could or that you would want to use for the project, for your Project 3 annotated bibliography. In fact, you can even, if you found an article of interest during Core Lecture 14 when you were applying those key terms, feel free to use one of those articles in this assignment. Then what I'd like you to do is perform a critical reading of the text and compose a brief, so about 50 words, like I said, write-up detailing the following. What were your initial thoughts after you skimmed the article? So after you looked at the introduction and the conclusion, and then what's one thought that you had while performing a deeper read of the text, and one question you had regarding the article. Now this is very open, and how you go about this will kind of be up to you, different topics, different takes. So what I'm really looking for is for you to say, yes, I really did deeply engage with the text and the argument. Here are my responses to what I read. All right, so for the weekly homework, you're going to include your Core Lecture 15 summary and assignment in your Week 8 homework submission. Overall, Week 8 should include the summaries and assignments for Core Lectures 14, 15, and 16, as well as a mini lecture of your choice. And that is all going to be due to Canvas before 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, October 13th. If you have any questions or you'd like to discuss these concepts in greater detail, please contact me via Canvas DM. All right, everyone, until next time.